The June sun shone intensely over the immaculate gardens of Stirling Manor, where 300 high society guests eagerly awaited the wedding of the year. Liam Stirling, heir to a real estate empire valued at billions, was about to marry Tiffany Blackwood, a socialite whose beauty was rivaled only by her ambition. White flowers imported from the Netherlands perfumed the air, while the orchestra tuned their instruments for the wedding march. Everything seemed perfect, meticulously planned, as always happened with Stirling family events. But fate, ironically, had other plans for what was supposed to be the happiest day of Liam Stirling's life. What should have been a celebration of love and union became the moment a shadow from the past resurfaced, not only in flesh and bone, but in triplicate. Ready for the shock? Because Sarah, the broken ex-wife, didn't just show up. She brought with her the living proof of a betrayal no one had ever imagined. The altar turned into the stage of a scandal that shook high society in a way none of those present would ever forget. The story you are about to experience is not just about an interrupted wedding. It is about justice, silent revenge, and the transformative power of a woman everyone believed to be destroyed. It is about how arrogance can turn against those who cultivate it, and how the universe sometimes conspires in inexplicable ways to balance the scales of justice. Sarah Chen Stirling had been, for 3 years, Liam's invisible wife. Invisible to his family, invisible to the society around them, and often, it seemed, invisible even to her own husband. She had married for love, naively believing that feeling would be enough to overcome the barriers imposed by the difference in social class. The daughter of Chinese immigrants who worked in a laundromat in the city's working-class district, Sarah represented everything matriarch Beatrice Stirling despised: humble origins, lack of social pedigree, and worst of all, inadequate blood for the Stirling lineage. During those 3 infernal years, Sarah endured daily humiliations. Beatrice made a point of reminding her of her place at every opportunity. Family dinners were battlefields where Sarah was consistently attacked with biting remarks about her inappropriate clothes, her common manners, and her inability to integrate into the Stirling social circle. Liam, cowardly as he always was when it came to confronting his mother, remained silent, letting Sarah bleed emotionally with every attack. "You should wear more makeup, dear," Beatrice would say with a venomous smile. "After all, you need to make up for your lack of... well, you understand." Sarah understood perfectly. She understood that she would never be accepted, no matter how hard she tried. But she kept trying, because she loved Liam with an intensity that bordered on self-destruction. She believed that eventually he would find the courage to defend her, to choose her over his mother's approval. How foolish she had been. The revelation of the infidelity came brutally, as these things usually do. Sarah discovered the messages between Liam and Tiffany on a tablet forgotten in the living room. Messages dating back months, filled with passionate declarations and plans for the future. A future that did not include Sarah. What hurt her most was not the betrayal itself, but the casual cruelty in Liam's words. "My mother is right," he had written to Tiffany. "Sarah never fit into our world. Marrying her was a mistake. But soon we'll be free." Free, as if Sarah were a prison, an obstacle to be removed. That night, when Liam arrived home, Sarah confronted him. The argument was explosive. 3 years of suppressed pain finally finding a voice. For the first time, Sarah did not cry, did not beg, did not make herself small. She screamed, threw the tablet against the wall, and demanded answers. "You're so dramatic," Liam said with a tired sigh, as if she were overreacting to something trivial. "Look at you. Look at Tiffany. Did you really think I would stay married to someone so common? My mother was right from the beginning." It was at that moment that something inside Sarah died. Not her spirit, although it would take time for her to realize that, but her illusion of who Liam truly was. She finally saw that she had married a weak man, incapable of loving anything beyond his own convenience and his mother's approval. 3 days later, Sarah left Sterling Manor in the middle of the night, taking only a suitcase of clothes and what remained of her dignity. She did not yet know it, but she was also carrying something far more precious: 3 small lives growing inside her. The pregnancy test she would take 2 weeks later, in a gas station bathroom on the interstate highway, would reveal that she was pregnant with triplets. That discovery could have completely broken Sarah, a woman alone, without resources, pregnant with 3 babies. The odds were not in her favor. But Sarah Chen Sterling, who would soon return to using only Chen, was made of tougher material than anyone had imagined. Perhaps it was her parents' genes, who had started over from nothing in a foreign country. Perhaps it was simply anger, transformed into productive fuel. She drove to Seattle, where an old college friend took her in. In the months that followed, as her belly grew with 3 babies who were identical copies of the father who had rejected them before even knowing of their existence, Sarah rebuilt her life from the ground up. She used her skills in technology. She had graduated in computer science before meeting Liam, to start a digital security consulting business, working remotely. The birth of Ethan, Noah, and Lucas was simultaneously the most terrifying and the most transformative day of Sarah's life. 3 perfect boys, with the amber eyes characteristic of the Sterling bloodline and the dark hair they inherited from her. Looking at them for the first time, Sarah made a silent promise. They would never know the rejection she had experienced. They would grow up knowing their worth, protected from the poison of the Sterlings. The years that followed were marked by hard work and sacrifice, but also by exponential growth. Sarah's consultancy evolved into a technology company focused on cybersecurity. Her expertise and relentless work ethic attracted major clients. Gradually, contracts with large corporations began to appear. 3 years after leaving Sterling Manor, Sarah had built an empire valued at more than $100 million. But she kept everything discreet, operating under a corporate name that did not connect her directly to the Sterling family. She did not want Liam or Beatrice to discover her success, and she definitely did not want them to discover the boys. Not yet. Maybe never. Fate, however, had different plans. The invitation arrived on a sunny May afternoon, 5 years after Sarah had left Sterling Manor. A premium paper envelope addressed to Sarah Chen Sterling, delivered by a private messenger. Sarah held it with trembling hands, immediately recognizing the family crest stamped into the wax seal. Inside, the invitation was a masterpiece of elegance and arrogance. Beatrice Sterling has the pleasure of inviting you to the wedding of her son, Liam Alexander Sterling, to Tiffany Rose Blackwood. Date, June 15th. Location, Sterling Manor. Dress code, formal attire. There was an attached handwritten note in Beatrice's perfectly trained handwriting. Dear Sarah, it would be a shame if you could not attend Liam's wedding. After all, you were part of his life during a less fortunate time. We have reserved a special seat for you at the ceremony. Do not worry about the dress code. I know it can be difficult for someone in your situation. Whatever you have will do. Beatrice. Sarah read the note 3 times, feeling anger boil in her veins. The intention was crystal clear. Beatrice wanted to humiliate her publicly. She wanted Sarah to appear as the failed ex-wife, so everyone could see the contrast between poor Sarah and dazzling Tiffany. It was a final act of cruelty, a way to reaffirm the superiority of the Sterlings. For days, Sarah considered ignoring the invitation. Why subject herself to that spectacle? She had built a new life, far away from that toxicity. But then, looking at Ethan, Noah, and Lucas playing in the living room, something shifted in her perspective. They deserved to know the truth about their father. Not the romanticized version Sarah occasionally shared, but reality. And more importantly, Liam deserved to know that his actions had consequences, that he had discarded not only a wife, but 3 children. 3 perfect human beings who carried his DNA. Sarah's revenge would not be shouted or violent. It would be silent, elegant, and absolutely devastating. She began to plan. At the height of their arrogance, the Sterling family summoned Sarah to Liam's wedding with a single purpose: to humiliate her. Beatrice's plan was simple and cruel: to reserve a servant's seat for Sarah, expecting to see her crawl, watching helplessly as Liam married a proper woman. They had no idea that poor Sarah had not only survived, but was flourishing in secret. Beatrice Sterling had orchestrated public humiliations before. It was almost a hobby for the matriarch. She firmly believed that keeping people in their places was essential to social order, and what better place to put the unsuitable ex-daughter-in-law than in a seat strategically positioned among the mansion staff. Put her in the last row next to the waiters, Beatrice had instructed her personal assistant. I want everyone to see where she ended up. It will be a wonderful lesson about the consequences of trying to rise above one's station. Sterling Manor was transformed into a magazine-worthy setting. Internationally renowned floral designers created arrangements that cost more than most people earn in a year. The guest list read like a who's who of the elite: CEOs, politicians, celebrities, and heirs to old fortunes. Tiffany Blackwood, radiant in her $200,000 wedding dress, was the embodiment of Beatrice's matrimonial dreams. Finally, a suitable woman for my son, Beatrice repeated to anyone willing to listen. Not like that Chinese woman he allowed himself to be fooled by the first time. The casual racism in her words was as natural as breathing. To Beatrice, Sarah represented not only a threat to the purity of the Sterling bloodline, but a reminder that even her perfect son could make mistakes. Inviting her to the wedding was a way to erase that mistake publicly, to show the world that the Sterlings always corrected their missteps. But Beatrice Sterling, in all her aristocratic arrogance, had made a fatal mistake. She underestimated Sarah. While Beatrice planned humiliation, Sarah planned something very different. She would not attend as the broken ex-wife Beatrice expected. Oh no, Sarah Chen would return as the millionaire CEO she had become, accompanied by the living proof that the story had not ended the night she left Sterling Manor 5 years earlier. Sarah invested in preparation as if she were planning a military campaign. First, her appearance. She hired a personal stylist who had worked with Hollywood celebrities. Together, they chose a dress that cost more than Beatrice's car, an exclusive design from a French haute couture house, in an emerald tone that perfectly complemented her skin and contrasted dramatically with the virginal white that would dominate the ceremony. The jewelry came from an auction of historic estates, a diamond necklace that had once belonged to a European duchess. The shoes were custom Louboutins. Her hair would be styled in an elegant and sophisticated updo, very different from the simple styles she wore during her marriage to Liam. But Sarah's masterstroke was not her appearance. It was what, or rather who, would accompany her. Ethan, Noah, and Lucas were 5 years old and were, indisputably, the most perfect copies of Liam Sterling anyone could imagine. The same amber eyes with the distinctive golden ring characteristic of the Sterling family. The same facial structure, with the strong jawline that had defined Sterling men for generations. The same mischievous smile that Liam had in childhood photographs. Sarah dressed her sons in tailored suits, perfect miniature versions of luxury men's tailoring. Every detail was carefully considered. Navy blue ties, shoes polished to a shine, hair cut by an elite barber. They looked like 3 little princes, which, technically, they were. Princes of an empire they did not yet know. "Mommy, why are we so dressed up?" Noah asked as Sarah adjusted his tie. "Because you're going to meet some important people today," Sarah replied, carefully choosing her words. She had explained to the boys in age-appropriate terms that they had a father who did not know of their existence, that today would be the day that truth came to light. "Are we going to meet our dad?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with excitement and nervousness. "Yes," Sarah said softly. "But remember, no matter what happens today, you always have me, and I will always have you." Sarah also took practical precautions. She hired a discreet security team, 3 men in suits who looked like ordinary guests, but were in fact trained bodyguards. She did not know how Beatrice or Liam would react, and she would not take risks with her children's safety. In addition, Sarah prepared documents, DNA tests carried out months earlier. She had kept a few strands of Liam's hair from years before, the boys' birth certificates, photographs documenting every milestone of their lives, first steps, first days of school, birthdays. Everything meticulously organized in an elegant dossier. Sarah's lawyer, Marcus Chen, no family relation, though they coincidentally shared the surname, stood ready with a series of legal documents. If things took certain directions, Sarah was prepared to act immediately. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus had asked during one of their planning sessions. "Once you open this door, there's no closing it. The Sterlings are known for being vindictive." "I know," Sarah replied with a calm that surprised even herself. "But my children deserve to know who their father is. And Liam deserves to know that his actions had consequences." On the morning of the wedding, Sarah woke at 5 a.m. She spent hours preparing, not out of vanity, but as a warrior prepares for battle. Every detail had to be perfect. This was not just an appearance, it was a declaration. At 2 in the afternoon, a black limousine stopped in front of Sarah's house in Seattle. The driver, part of the security team she had hired, opened the door with a respectful bow. Sarah, holding Ethan's and Noah's hands, Lucas held Noah's, forming a chain, entered the vehicle with the grace of a queen. The drive to Sterling Manor took 90 minutes. Throughout the journey, Sarah kept her breathing controlled, practicing the meditation techniques she had learned over the past years. She could not afford to show nervousness or fear. Today, she needed to embody confidence and power. The boys, on the other hand, were fascinated by the limousine and chatted excitedly, pointing at things through the window. Their innocence and enthusiasm helped Sarah maintain perspective. This was not about personal revenge, although that was a pleasant bonus. It was about ensuring that her children knew their full heritage. At 3:45, 15 minutes before the scheduled start of the ceremony, the limousine passed through the gates of Sterling Manor. Sarah felt her heart race, but kept her face serene. The security guards discreetly flanked her as she and the boys stepped out of the vehicle, and that was when the true masterpiece of poetic justice began. The shock froze the entire venue when Sarah, radiating power in a luxurious dress and accompanied by security, not only ignored the servant's seat, but marched straight to the front row. And she was not alone. 3 small beings, identical copies of Liam, followed her. The air became electrified. The first to notice was James, the head butler who had served the Sterling family for 40 years. He was positioned at the entrance of the garden where the ceremony would take place, greeting guests and directing them to their seats. When he saw Sarah, his face, normally a mask of impeccable professionalism, registered genuine shock. "Mrs. Sarah," he stammered, nearly dropping the clipboard with the guest list. "James," Sarah replied with a graceful nod, as if they were old friends meeting again. "It's been a long time." But James was not looking at Sarah. His eyes were fixed on the 3 boys accompanying her, impeccably dressed and holding her hands. The butler had served the Sterling family long enough to recognize unmistakable genetics. Those amber eyes, that facial structure. Dear God. Your seat is," he began, consulting his clipboard with trembling hands. "In the area of... in the front row, I imagine." Sarah interrupted gently, with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Where else should the mother of your grandchildren sit?" James opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. Before he could respond, Sarah was already passing him, confidently heading toward the garden where 300 elite guests waited. The effect was instant and devastating. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze in the air. Heads turned in unison, creating a wave of movement that swept through the garden like falling dominoes. The string quartet playing background music literally stopped playing, the musicians as distracted as everyone else. Sarah walked down the central aisle. The very aisle Tiffany was meant to walk as a bride, with the posture of a runway model. Her emerald dress captured the afternoon sunlight, the diamond jewelry at her neck reflecting prisms of light. The security guards flanked her at a respectful distance, their presence subtle, yet unmistakable. But it was not Sarah who held everyone's attention, it was the boys. Ethan, Noah, and Lucas walked beside their mother with a grace surprising for 5-year-old children. Sarah had prepared them well, rehearsing the entrance like choreography, and the effect was undeniable. 3 perfect miniatures of Liam Sterling, so identical to their father that it was almost unsettling. "My God," someone murmured in the front rows. That can't be the eyes," another voice whispered. "Look at their eyes, their Sterling eyes." The front row, reserved for immediate family, was partially occupied. Uncle Richard Sterling, Beatrice's younger brother, was seated there with his wife Amanda. Richard, a renowned geneticist who had dedicated his career to the study of hereditary traits, slowly rose from his seat, his eyes fixed on the boys. Sarah stopped directly in front of him, deliberately positioning the boys so that their resemblance to Liam was impossible to ignore in the clear afternoon light. "Richard," she said with icy courtesy, "I hope you don't mind us taking these seats. After all, family should sit together, shouldn't it?" Richard did not answer. He was completely absorbed in analysing the boys. His eyes, trained by decades of genetic study, examined every detail of their young faces, bone structure, facial proportions, skin tone, and especially the eyes. Ah, the eyes. The Sterling eyes were famous within the family, objects of pride and fascination for generations. They were not simply amber, they had a distinctive golden ring around the pupil, a trait so rare that Richard had written academic papers about it. It was a dominant autosomal trait, unique to the Sterling lineage, traceable through 6 generations, and there they were, perfectly replicated in 3 pairs of children's eyes. "Partial heterochromia," Richard murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "The golden ring, it's genetically impossible." "Impossible to replicate without being a Sterling," Sarah completed calmly. "Yes, I know. Your nephew told me about it years ago, when we were still married." The garden had become so silent that Sarah's words carried perfectly, reaching even the guests in the last rows. 300 people collectively held their breath. It was at that moment that Beatrice Sterling made her entrance. The family matriarch had been inside the mansion, supervising the final preparations and making sure Tiffany was ready. When a breathless assistant ran to inform her about the situation in the garden, Beatrice initially dismissed it as unnecessary drama. "Sarah is here," she said disdainfully. "Excellent. I hope she enjoys her seat with the staff." "No, Mrs. Sterling," the assistant stammered. She isn't seated with the staff. She's in the front row, with children." Beatrice marched toward the garden like a general going to war, her expression a storm of aristocratic fury. She wore an expensive beige dress that cost more than a luxury car, and family jewelry dating back to the 19th century. Her entrance should have been impressive, but it was completely overshadowed by the scene awaiting her. Because there, in the front row, seated exactly where Beatrice herself should have been, was Sarah Chen. And beside her, 3 boys who were undeniably, incontestably, Sterling. Beatrice stopped in the middle of the aisle, her face cycling through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, horror, denial, and finally, pure rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed, marching towards Sarah. "How dare you show up here with those children?" Sarah suggested gently. "Your grandchildren!" "Lies!" Beatrice practically screamed, her aristocratic composure finally cracking. "I don't know what kind of scam you think you're pulling, but this isn't a scam, Beatrice," Richard intervened, his voice carrying the weight of scientific authority. He had approached the boys, crouching down to be at eye level with them. "Beatrice, look at them. Really look." "I will not," Beatrice began, But her voice died as she finally focused her attention on the boys. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Ethan, the oldest of the triplets by 2 minutes, looked directly at Beatrice and smiled. That mischievous, charming smile that was pure Sterling genetics. The same smile Liam had used to win Sarah over years earlier. The same smile Beatrice's own father had worn in old photographs. "Hello," Ethan said politely, extending his small hand. "I'm Ethan. These are my brothers, Noah and Lucas. It's a pleasure to meet you." The voice, even the voice, carried that peculiar Sterling tone. Beatrice staggered backward as if she had been physically struck. Her hand flew to her chest, and for a moment Sarah genuinely feared the woman might suffer a heart attack right there. "When?" Beatrice whispered, forcing the words through pale lips. "When did you—" "I was pregnant when I left," Sarah replied calmly. "With triplets. I didn't know yet, but I found out 2 weeks later. I decided it would be better to raise them far away from Sterling influence." The crowd of guests was in controlled pandemonium. Whispers raced through the rows like fire through dry grass. Phones were discreetly pulled out, despite the strict no photos rule Beatrice had imposed. This was a story high society would talk about for decades. "You have no right," Beatrice began, regaining a fragment of her usual composure. "I have every right," Sarah interrupted, her voice still calm but forged of steel. "They are my children. I raised them alone while you and your son discarded me like trash. But they are also Sterling whether you like it or not. And today, they are going to meet their father." It was at that moment that Liam Sterling, finally alerted to the commotion, appeared at the entrance to the garden. He looked stunning in his custom-made tuxedo, prepared for what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. His face carried that slightly irritated expression of someone whose ceremony was being delayed by unnecessary drama. "Mum, what's going on? Tiffany is waiting and—" He stopped abruptly, his eyes locking onto Sarah. Recognition was immediate. Despite the years, despite the dramatic transformation in her appearance and bearing, Liam knew that face. For a fraction of a second, something crossed his expression. Perhaps guilt, or the memory of feelings long buried. But then his gaze dropped to the 3 boys standing beside Sarah, and the world stopped. Liam Sterling, heir to billions, a man who had navigated complex business deals and high-risk negotiations, stood completely motionless. His face drained of colour so quickly that Sarah feared he might faint. "What?" he began, his voice barely a hoarse whisper. "That can't be—" "5 years," Sarah said, standing up and positioning herself protectively in front of her children. "5 years ago, you told me I was too ordinary to be your wife, that your mother was right about me. And 3 days later, I found out I was pregnant, with triplets. Your children, Liam. Your children you never wanted to know." "I didn't know," Liam protested, finally finding his voice. He took 1 step toward them, then another, as if moving through a dream. "Sarah, I swear, I never knew." "And if you had known," Sarah challenged, "would you have changed, or would you have pressured me to get rid of them so they wouldn't complicate your perfectly planned life?" Liam had no answer. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Noah, always the most emotionally perceptive of the triplets, tightened his grip on Sarah's hand. "Mommy, is that our dad?" The word dad came out loud and clear, echoing through the silent garden like a gunshot, and that was when Tiffany Blackwood appeared. The wedding, once a fairy tale, collapsed in seconds. Tiffany, the bride, felt the knife of betrayal and abandoned Liam at the altar, amid a public scandal that would echo for years. The humiliation the Sterlings had planned for Sarah turned against them in a spectacle of epic proportions. But the saga was far from over. Tiffany Blackwood was the embodiment of the perfect bride. Her dress, a masterpiece of French lace and silk, had taken 6 months to be made. Her hair was styled in soft waves that had taken 3 hours to perfect. Her makeup was flawless, applied by an artist who worked with Hollywood celebrities. She had waited in the mansion's bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids, vaguely aware of the commotion outside but paying it little attention. There was always some drama at high society weddings, perhaps a drunk guest or some scandalous gossip. But when her best friend, Charlotte, burst into the room with a pale face, Tiffany knew something was terribly wrong. "Tiff," Charlotte said, nearly out of breath, "you need to go downstairs. Now." "Don't be ridiculous," Tiffany replied, checking her reflection one last time. "The bride can't appear before the right moment. It's bad luck." "Tiffany," Charlotte grabbed her arm firmly, "Liam's ex-wife is here, with 3 children. Children who look exactly like him. She's saying they're his sons." The lipstick Tiffany had been reapplying slipped from her hand, staining the cream-coloured carpet. When Tiffany reached the entrance to the garden, what she saw was worse than any nightmare she could have imagined. Liam stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, staring at 3 small boys who were undeniably miniature versions of himself, and beside them stood a woman Tiffany recognized from old photographs. Sarah, but transformed, radiant in a dress that rivaled Tiffany's own in elegance. "Liam?" Tiffany called, her voice trembling. "What's going on?" Liam turned toward her, and Tiffany saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Absolute panic and crushing guilt. "Tiff, I can explain." "Explain what?" Tiffany demanded, her voice rising with each word. She was vaguely aware that 300 people were watching her, but she no longer cared. "That you have 3 secret children? That you lied to me throughout our entire relationship?" "He didn't know," Sarah interjected unexpectedly, not to defend Liam, but because the truth mattered. "I was pregnant when I left, but I didn't know yet. He never knew about the boys." "But he knew about you," Tiffany shot back, pointing accusingly at Sarah. "About how he treated you, about how he had an affair with me while he was still married to you." The silence that followed was different. This was new information for many of the guests. They knew about Liam's divorce, of course, but not the circumstances. Tiffany turned back to Liam, tears smearing her flawless makeup. "You told me you married young and that it didn't work out. You never mentioned that you had an affair with me while you were still married. That you left your wife for me." "It wasn't like that," Liam began weakly. "It wasn't like that." Tiffany laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "Then what was it like, Liam? Enlighten me." Beatrice, finally recovering from her initial shock, tried to regain control. "Tiffany, dear, this is clearly an attempt at sabotage. Calm down and we can deal with this after the ceremony." "After the ceremony?" Tiffany screamed. "Are you insane? There is no ceremony. Not after this." She ripped the veil from her head with a violent motion, nearly tearing out the carefully placed pins from her hair. She threw it to the ground and stomped on it, staining the delicate lace with grass. 3 years, she continued, now directing her full fury at Liam. 3 years together. You made me believe I was special, that I was different, and all this time you were nothing but a liar and a cheater. Tiffany, please. Liam reached out, but she recoiled, as if his touch burned. Don't touch me, she spat. Never touch me again. We are over. And with that, Tiffany Blackwood, who should have become Tiffany Sterling in less than an hour, ran back into the mansion. The sound of her sobs and her high heels against the marble floor echoed through the silent garden. The bridesmaids hesitated for a moment before running after her. Liam stood there, abandoned on what should have been his wedding day, in front of 300 stunned guests, his triumphant ex-wife, and 3 children he never knew existed. And then, as if the universe had decided that the humiliation was not yet complete, the string quartet, clearly unsure what to do in such an unprecedented situation, began to play again. The music they had chosen, Pachelbel's Canon in D, the classic wedding processional, The irony was not lost on anyone. Someone began to laugh, a nervous laugh, quickly stifled, but it was like opening a floodgate. Soon, murmurs and whispers filled the garden. Phones were no longer discreet. Cameras openly pointed, capturing every second of the disaster. "This is a circus," Beatrice murmured, her face a mask of horror. Her entire life had been dedicated to maintaining the Sterling family's impeccable image, and now, in a single day, everything was collapsing. Sarah, for her part, simply tightened her grip on her son's hands and began guiding them back down the aisle. She had not come to stay for the ceremony, if there even was going to be one. She had come to make a statement, and that statement had been delivered spectacularly. "Wait!" Liam called, finally finding his voice. "Sarah, wait!" She stopped, but did not turn around. "They really are—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Yours?" Sarah completed. "Yes, I have DNA tests, birth certificates. Everything you might need as proof. But just look at them, Liam. Anyone with eyes can see." Liam approached slowly, as if afraid of frightening them. He knelt on the ground, dirtying his $3,000 tuxedo to bring himself to the boy's eye level. "Hello," he said softly. I'm Liam." "We know who you are," Lucas, the quietest of the three, said. "You're our dad. Mummy showed us pictures." Lucas's voice trembled slightly. Despite all of Sarah's preparation, they were still 5-year-old children in an overwhelmingly adult and confusing situation. "I'm sorry," Liam whispered, tears finally welling in his eyes. "I'm so sorry. If I had known. But you didn't," Sarah said firmly. "And now that you do, the question is, what are you going to do about it?" It was the question of the century, and Liam had no answer. The days that followed the disastrous wedding were a whirlwind of legal and media activity. The story spread like wildfire. "Billionaire heir discovers secret triplets on his wedding day" became a headline in every tabloid. Videos secretly filmed by guests circulated on social media, racking up millions of views. Beatrice Sterling, publicly humiliated in a way her social standing had never experienced before, did what she always did when confronted with problems. She tried to buy a solution. In her blind fury, Beatrice attempted to buy custody of her grandchildren by filing a custody lawsuit. But Sarah, the CEO no one had anticipated, had an ace up her sleeve. The case was dismissed 1 week after the disastrous wedding. Beatrice's lawyers were the best money could buy. A team of 15 from one of the most prestigious law firms in the country. Their argument was simple. Liam Sterling, as the biological father, had parental rights, and since Liam was still financially dependent on and closely tied to Beatrice, she would naturally play a significant role in the boys' lives. The secondary argument, unstated but implicit on every page of the legal documents, was even more insidious. Sarah, as a single mother who had hidden the children from their father for 5 years, was unfit to be their sole guardian. The Sterlings would seek at least joint custody, and possibly full custody. "They're going to try to paint you as an unfit mother," Marcus Chen, Sarah's attorney, explained during an emergency meeting. "They'll argue that you deprived the children of their right to know their father, that you acted selfishly by hiding them." "I was protecting them," Sarah replied, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "I know that. You know that. But in a courtroom, with skilled attorneys and a judge who may have biases against single mothers, we need more than the truth. We need evidence." Sarah smiled, a cold smile that would have sent a chill down Beatrice Sterling's spine. "Oh, I have evidence. A lot of evidence." Because Sarah Chen had not spent the last 5 years merely building a business empire. She had also been preparing for this exact scenario. Immediately after leaving Sterling Manor years earlier, Sarah had begun documenting everything. Every abusive text message she had received from Beatrice during her marriage. She had kept them all, meticulously archived. Every humiliating interaction at family dinners. She had begun recording audio on her phone after the first year. Every racist remark, every belittlement, every moment of casual cruelty, all documented, dated, preserved. But that was only the beginning. During her years in Seattle, Sarah had discreetly hired private investigators to monitor the Sterling family. What they uncovered was explosive. The revered Sterling fortune was not as solid as it appeared. Liam, under Beatrice's financial guidance, had made a series of disastrous investments, failed real estate projects, tech startups that evaporated, market bets that went sour. The family was in financial ruin, though they maintained a facade of wealth through massive loans and creative accounting. They were, in fact, only a few months away from potential bankruptcy. In addition, the investigators uncovered disturbing patterns. Beatrice had a history of abusive treatment not only towards Sarah, but toward employees as well. There were records of at least 7 former staff members who had left Sterling Manor citing a hostile work environment. 2 had sued for harassment, cases quietly settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. There was also evidence that Beatrice had attempted to bribe employees of a business rival, a federal crime if proven. Sarah compiled all of this into a dossier that Marcus nicknamed the Red Dossier. Red because it was radioactive, capable of completely destroying the Sterling family's reputation if it ever became public. "This is total war," Marcus observed, flipping through the documents. "If you release this—" "I know," Sarah said calmly. "It would completely destroy them. Potential prison for Beatrice for attempted bribery, public financial ruin, the end of the Sterling dynasty. And you're prepared to do that?" Sarah thought of her children. Ethan with his contagious laughter, Noah with his boundless empathy, Lucas with his quiet curiosity. She thought of the 5 years they had spent together, protected, happy, safe. "I will do whatever is necessary to protect them," she replied. Sarah's response to the custody lawsuit was a legal masterpiece. Instead of merely defending herself against the Sterling's accusations, she struck back with devastating force. She submitted the complete dossier detailing the abusive environment at Sterling Manor, arguing that exposing her children to Beatrice would be harmful to their emotional development. She included testimonies from former employees, recordings of abusive interactions, and psychological evaluations explaining the potential damage of exposing children to toxic parental figures. She also revealed the Sterling's precarious financial situation, arguing that their interest in the boys was not driven by familial love, but by financial motives, specifically the trust funds Sarah had established for each of her children, totaling more than $10 million each. And then, as a coup de grace, she made an offer. Liam would be allowed access to the children. He could build a relationship with them, but under specific and non-negotiable conditions. All contact would take place in Seattle, on Sarah's territory, initially supervised by a family therapist. Beatrice would be completely excluded from any contact with the boys until they were old enough to choose for themselves, defined as 18 years of age. Liam would be required to complete therapy sessions to address his inability to set boundaries with Beatrice and his long-standing pattern of enabling abuse. Beatrice would be required to withdraw any custody claims and sign a strict NDA, non-disclosure agreement, covering the entire situation. If any of these conditions were violated, Sarah would release the full Red Dossier to the media. It was a bold proposal, technically blackmail, though Marcus had been careful to frame it in a legally defensible manner. "They will never accept this," Beatrice declared when her attorneys presented the conditions to her. "I'm being excluded from my own grandchildren. This is outrageous." "It's this, or she releases everything," her lead attorney explained. "Beatrice, I've reviewed her documents. They are devastating. If this goes public, you could face criminal charges for attempted bribery. The family would lose everything." "She's bluffing." "I don't think she is," the attorney said quietly. "And even if she were, do you really want to take that risk?" The legal battle dragged on for 3 exhausting months. During that time, Sarah kept the boys carefully shielded from everything, protecting them from adult turmoil. She hired a child therapist to help them process the complex reality of suddenly having a father in their lives. Liam, for his part, was genuinely torn. Part of him wanted to fight, to assert his parental rights. But another part, a part that was finally, after 5 years, beginning to see clearly, recognized that Sarah was right about his mother. Beatrice was toxic. She had treated Sarah abominably. And if Liam were completely honest with himself, Beatrice had raised him into a weak man, incapable of making independent decisions, always seeking maternal approval. The turning point came during a particularly intense mediation session. Beatrice was present via video conference, refusing to be in the same room as Sarah. During the session, she made a casual remark about how the boys would need proper education to overcome the inferior heritage of their mother. Liam, who had been silent until that moment, spoke for the first time in his adult life. Enough. Beatrice stopped mid-sentence. What? I said enough, Mother. It's over. Sarah is right about you. She always has been. The silence in the conference room was absolute. You are disowning me for that. That, Beatrice began. I'm not choosing anyone, Liam interrupted, his voice unexpectedly firm. I'm choosing to do what is right. And what is right is accepting Sarah's terms. All of them. That was how the war ended, not with a dramatic trial, but with a signature on a mediation agreement. Beatrice withdrew all custody claims and signed the NDA. She would be completely separated from her grandchildren until they reached adulthood. If she violated the terms, she would face not only the release of the Red dossier, but also massive financial penalties that would finally bankrupt the family. Liam was granted progressive visitation rights. Initially, 2 supervised hours per week, gradually increasing as the boys became comfortable. He agreed to move to Seattle, purchasing an apartment 3 blocks from Sarah's home, and then the real work began. Rebuilding relationships and constructing something new. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, life had settled into a new normal. Imperfect, but functional. Ethan, Noah, and Lucas, now 7 years old, had a cautious but steadily growing relationship with Liam. He showed up every Wednesday and Saturday to take the boys out for activities, museums, parks, baseball games. He was not a perfect father. He still struggled with setting boundaries and often let parental guilt guide his decisions. But he was trying, truly trying. They deserve better than I was, he told Sarah during one of the custody exchanges. Better than what my mother raised me to be. Liam had begun intensive therapy, working through decades of maternal manipulation and emotional dependence. He had also started rebuilding his financial life, this time making his own investment decisions instead of blindly following Beatrice's advice. Ironically, far from his mother's toxic influence, Liam was finally becoming the man he could have been all along, strong, independent, capable of genuine love. Tiffany Blackwood, after a period of mourning the relationship, married a physician and moved to Boston. She occasionally appeared in tabloids with headlines like, "Sterling's ex-bride finds real happiness." A small but genuine satisfaction. And Beatrice Sterling, isolated in her mansion, surrounded by family portraits that now seemed to mock her, Beatrice lived the loneliest 2 years of her life. Her high society friends gradually abandoned her, embarrassed by the scandal, or simply bored without fresh gossip. The social empire she had meticulously built over decades collapsed. She did not see her grandchildren. She did not attend their first day of school, celebrate their birthdays, or witness their milestones. The price of her arrogance and cruelty was absolute solitude. There were moments, late at night, when Beatrice sat alone in the library with only a glass of expensive wine for company and wondered whether it had been her fault. Whether perhaps she should have treated Sarah differently. Whether she should have raised Liam to be a stronger man. But those moments of self-awareness were fleeting, quickly buried beneath layers of justification and denial. It was easier to blame Sarah, to blame declining social standards, to blame anyone and anything except herself. Sarah, meanwhile, flourished in ways no one could have predicted. Her cybersecurity company expanded internationally, opening offices in 5 countries. She was named one of Forbes's 30 under 40, recognized not only for her business success, but also for her mentorship programs for women entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. She bought a larger home in Seattle, still modest by sterling standards, but spacious and filled with light, with a garden where the boys could play. She hired a dedicated team so she could balance work and family life, something she had never imagined possible in the dark days after leaving Sterling Manor, and she finally allowed herself to fully process the trauma of those 3 years of marriage. In therapy, she worked through the layers of emotional abuse she had endured, learning to recognize her own worth in ways she never could while under Sterling control. "You don't need revenge," her therapist, Dr. Jennifer Martinez, told her during a particularly revealing session, "because your life, your success, your happiness, the way you raised your children, is already the greatest revenge possible." Dr. Martinez was right. Sarah did not need shouting or overt revenge. She did not need to actively destroy the Sterlings, though she certainly had the power to do so. Her silent victory, her professional success, control over her own life, and unwavering protection of her children was the sweetest poetic justice. The universe sometimes truly does conspire in favor of the just. One spring afternoon, Sarah stood in the garden watching Ethan, Noah, and Lucas play. Liam was there too, his scheduled visitation afternoon, helping the boys build a treehouse. The scene was almost normally domestic, though built upon a non-traditional family structure. "Mom!" Lucas called out. "Come see!" Sarah walked over to the tree, where the boys had painted a sign for their new clubhouse. Sterling Chen Boys Club. The hyphen mattered. The boys carried both last names now, a decision Sarah and Liam had reached together. They belonged to both families, even if one of those families had been reduced to a single active member. "It's perfect," Sarah said, hugging each of her sons. Liam climbed down from the tree, his shirt smeared with paint, and his face showing something Sarah had rarely seen during their marriage: genuine joy. "They're incredible," he said softly. "You did an amazing job raising them, Sarah." "We're raising them," Sarah corrected gently. "Together now." It wasn't forgiveness. Not completely. The wounds Liam had caused were too deep for quick healing. But it was the beginning of something different. A redefined family, built not on bloodlines or social expectations, but on mutual respect and genuine love for the 3 small lives they shared. That night, after Liam had left and the children were asleep, Sarah sat in her home office. On the wall, framed, was a photograph from the wedding that never happened. Not of the ceremony, but of the moment of her triumphant arrival. A guest photographer had captured her walking down the aisle with her 3 sons, radiating confidence and power. Sarah kept the photo not as a reminder of revenge, but as a reminder of how far she had come, of how strong she had become, of how she had transformed planned humiliation into definitive triumph. Her phone buzzed with a message from her attorney, Marcus Chen. "FYI, Beatrice's company formally declared bankruptcy today. It's in the news." Sarah read the message and then deleted it. She felt no joy at the Sterling's downfall, nor sadness, just a quiet sense of peace. Justice, in the end, had followed its course. She shut down her computer and went upstairs to check on her children one last time before bed. Ethan lay sprawled starfish style across his bed. Noah hugged a worn stuffed bear. Lucas slept peacefully on his side. 3 small lives that existed because she had the courage to leave a toxic marriage. 3 small miracles she had protected, nurtured, and raised into remarkable young boys. Yes, the universe does conspire in favor of the just. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it demands extraordinary courage and hard work. But in the end, the truth emerges. And those who sow kindness, or at least refuse to be broken by cruelty, reap rewards no sterling fortune could ever buy. Sarah Chen kissed each of her sons on the forehead and whispered, "You are my greatest victory." And in that moment, in a modest home in Seattle, surrounded by the love of her children and the peace of a battle finally won, Sarah experienced something she never had in 3 years of marriage in a mansion. True, unshakable happiness. The sweetest revenge is not destruction, it is living well. Have you ever witnessed a twist so epic? Sarah turned planned humiliation into absolute triumph, proved that true strength doesn't come from money or bloodline, but from character and determination. Share this story of overcoming and justice with your friends and watch their reaction. Because sometimes, the universe really does conspire in favor of those who refuse to be broken.